She shoved past the gate agent, her voice rising above the airport noise like a siren. "You can't stop me. I paid for this seat." The crowd froze as if time itself paused. The agent, a young woman with trembling hands, tried to explain that the boarding gate was already closed, but Karen slammed her oversized handbag onto the counter and screamed, "Call your supervisor. I'm not leaving this plane." The security guard nearby moved in cautiously, but she pointed a finger right at me, shouting, "He's with me. Let us through or I'll sue this entire airline." I wasn't with her. I'd never even seen her before in my life. But in that split second, every eye turned toward me, my heart pounded. If I said nothing, maybe they'd believe her lies. If I spoke up, I'd be dragged into a mess I hadn't asked for. Karen leaned closer to the agent, her fake smile snapping back on, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear, "He's my husband. He's military. We're going to a funeral." The gasps around us made me clench my jaw. My real service cap was tucked inside my bag, hidden, because I never liked showing it in public, and now this stranger was using my sacrifice as her excuse to force her way on board. The agent hesitated, clearly shaken. Karen saw the weakness and pushed harder. "If you don't let us on, you're disrespecting a veteran and his family. Do you want that headline tomorrow?" She smirked, convinced she had already won. My blood boiled, but I stayed silent, watching how far she would go. Then, out of nowhere, she turned and grabbed my arm, nails digging into my sleeve. "Tell them," she barked, "tell them who you are." The whole gate area went quiet. Cameras were already out. People were recording. I pulled my arm free, my voice steady but sharp. "Lady, I don't know you. Don't touch me again." A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Karen's smile cracked for the first time, but she recovered fast, lifting her chin. "He's lying," she declared, her voice shaking. "He doesn't want attention, but we are family. He'll confirm it later." Security stepped closer, but Karen didn't back down. She planted her feet like she owned the floor, daring them to drag her away. My pulse raced because I knew something nobody else did. This wasn't just about a woman trying to sneak onto a plane. She had no idea the person she had chosen to use as her pawn had more authority than she could imagine. And the moment I revealed it, her entire plan would collapse in front of everyone holding their phones. But I waited, because sometimes the best way to destroy a lie is to let the liar talk too much. Karen wasn't finished. She spun toward the security guard and barked, "If you don't let me through, I'll have you fired. I know the director of this airport." Her voice was so sharp that even the kids sitting nearby started crying. The gate agent tried again, politely, to explain that the door was sealed and the flight was preparing for takeoff. But Karen slammed both hands on the counter, rattling the pens and computer screen. "Open it, do you know who I am?" The guard reached for his radio, but before he could speak, two men in cheap-looking uniforms appeared from the waiting area. They had shiny badges clipped to their shirts, but something about them was off. Their belts were mismatched. One had sneakers instead of boots, and their patches didn't match any airport authority I'd ever seen. Karen pointed at them like they were her personal army. "These are my people. They'll handle this." The crowd erupted in disbelief. "Fake cops," someone muttered, pulling their phone higher to record. The two men puffed out their chests, acting official, and one barked, "Step aside. We're escorting this woman on board." But the problem for Karen was simple. She had chosen the wrong battlefield. Because the moment they flashed those fake badges, I knew exactly what I was looking at. Years of service had trained me to spot counterfeit law enforcement from a mile away. I kept quiet at first, letting the scene unravel. The passengers were murmuring, debating whether these officers were real. Karen puffed herself up like a queen. "See, I told you, you'll regret doubting me." She turned to me again, narrowing her eyes. "Stand with me or you'll regret it too." I stepped forward, calm and steady, and the energy shifted. Fake cops stiffened as I looked them up and down. Karen thought I was caving in, that I was finally going to play along. But then I spoke, slow and cold. "Those badges, they're not real. And if you try to take one more step, you'll both be in cuffs before this crowd even finishes recording." The gate agent's eyes widened. The security guard paused, unsure whether to intervene, and Karen, Her face turned red like she couldn't decide whether to scream or faint. "He's lying again," she shrieked, but her voice cracked this time. People in the crowd started shouting too. "Check their badges, call the real cops." I could feel the momentum shifting. The woman who thought she owned the room was starting to lose control, and the fake cops who thought they could intimidate everyone were realizing they'd just walked into the wrong trap. And none of them knew the truth yet, because I hadn't revealed my real card. Not yet. The two fake officers froze when the crowd pressed in closer, phones aimed directly at their faces. One of them tried to sound tough, barking, "Everyone step back, this is official business." But his voice cracked under the pressure. Karen clapped her hands like a director on a movie set, shouting, "Yes, do your job, arrest the agent, arrest him too." And then she jabbed a finger at me, her nails trembling with rage. "He's obstructing justice." The security guard's hand hovered over his radio, torn between following protocol and giving in to the chaos. Karen's eyes blazed with fake confidence, but her breathing was ragged, sharp, like she was only a few seconds away from losing it completely. She whispered at me through clenched teeth, "Back me up or you'll regret it. I'll make sure you never fly again." That was it. I reached into my bag and pulled out my wallet, not rushing, not dramatic, just steady. I flipped it open, and the gold badge inside caught the fluorescent lights overhead. The murmurs around us turned into gasps. A kid in the corner whispered to his dad, "He's real." Karen's words choked in her throat. The fake cops took half a step back. "I'm federal," I said calmly, holding the badge where everyone could see. My voice didn't need to rise, the silence carried it. "And impersonating law enforcement, that's a federal crime." Karen tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "He's bluffing," she stammered, eyes darting between me and the security guard. "This is all just a—" She never finished the sentence, because the real airport police finally pushed through the crowd. Their uniforms were crisp, their gear regulation, their presence undeniable, and the first thing they did was look straight at the two imposters and demand, "Badges, now." The fakes hesitated, then slowly unclipped the shiny plastic pieces of junk they'd been flashing. One officer turned it over, shook his head, and muttered, "Counterfeit, clear as day." The crowd erupted, half in laughter, half in outrage. Phones caught every second of it. Karen's face went pale, but she still tried one last desperate move, pointing at me again. "He's part of this. He tricked me into—" "Enough." I cut her off, my voice louder this time. "You tried to use my name, my service, and my country to force your way onto a plane. You lied to everyone here, and now the truth's out." The real cops turned to her. For the first time, Karen's hands began to shake. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She wasn't in control anymore. The stage she built for herself had just collapsed under her feet, and I wasn't done yet. The airport police surrounded Karen, but she didn't surrender quietly. She twisted her face into a mask of fake tears, clutching her chest like she was the victim. "You don't understand," she wailed, pointing at the gate agent. "She attacked me first. She refused my boarding pass and humiliated me in front of everyone." Her voice cracked as she stumbled backward, grabbing the sleeve of one of the real officers. "I only defended myself. She jabbed her finger toward me. He threatened me with that fake badge." The entire terminal gasped. For a moment, the officers hesitated, turning toward me, and just like that, Karen spun the spotlight. The woman who had been caught lying, who had paraded fake cops into an airport, now stood shaking and sobbing like she was the target of a crime. A murmur rolled through the crowd. People weren't sure who to believe anymore. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with doubt. The agent's lips trembled as if she wasn't sure whether to speak up. One officer stepped closer to me, his tone firm. "Sir, we're going to need you to hand that badge over for verification." The crowd buzzed again. Karen's smirk flickered back for half a second, hidden under her tears, as if she thought she'd flipped the tables on me. "Yes," she said shakily, "check it. He's lying. He's using me as a cover. I'm the one who was assaulted here." That sting hit deep. It wasn't just a lie. It was a calculated attack, turning my years of service, my truth, into a weapon against me. I could feel the audience of phones recording every angle, waiting to see if I was about to be cuffed and dragged away like a criminal. For the first time, my stomach tightened. This wasn't just about a woman screaming for attention anymore. If the officers made the wrong call, I could lose more than my flight. I could lose my name, my reputation, everything I'd worked for. I kept my voice steady, but inside, the injustice burned like fire. "You're accusing a federal officer of impersonation," I asked, locking eyes with the lead cop. My tone wasn't anger, it was warning. "If you get this wrong, the lawsuit won't be on me, it'll be on you." The officer studied me carefully, then took my badge with both hands. He examined it under the harsh terminal lights. Seconds felt like hours. Karen whispered frantically to the officer beside her, nodding toward me. He threatened me. He grabbed me. I was scared for my life. The officer finally looked up from the badge, his expression unreadable. He walked a slow circle around Karen before speaking. "This badge is real, federal issue. He's telling the truth." Karen's fake sobs stopped instantly. Her mouth hung open, but no words came. The crowd erupted with shouts, some cheering, some booing at her. But before relief could settle over me, one of the officers turned back and said, "Still, we need to take both of you for questioning." The injustice twisted tighter, me dragged in alongside her, the liar who had tried to destroy me. My fists clenched, but I stayed calm. If they wanted to play it this way, fine, because I had one last card, and once I played it, Karen's world would collapse in front of everyone watching. They led us away from the gate, the crowd's noise fading behind us, but their cameras still raised, catching every step. Karen walked with her head high again, whispering to one of the officers, "Thank you for protecting me. I knew you'd see through his act." She even dared to glance back at me, her smirk returning like she'd already won. To her, this was victory. She had pulled me into the mud with her. Inside the small security room, the air was thick with tension. One officer motioned for us to sit. Karen dropped into the chair dramatically, clutching her bag as if it contained her crown jewels. I stayed standing, arms crossed, waiting. The lead officer set my badge on the table and said, "Sir, protocol requires we confirm your credentials with the federal database." Karen's eyes sparkled. She thought she'd bought herself time to spin more lies. She launched into another performance, her voice dripping with fake pain. "He grabbed me in front of everyone. He threatened me with that badge. I just wanted to see my mother before surgery, and he tried to ruin it." Tears rolled down her cheeks, perfectly timed. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly sympathetic. She saw it and pressed harder. "Look at me. I'm a woman alone, traveling for family. Why would I make this up?" That was the moment I dropped my final card. Calm, deliberate, I pulled a slim black folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "Open it." I told the lead officer. He hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside were stamped federal documents with my full clearance, my service history, and, most important, my active role as a federal air marshal. Karen's jaw unhinged. The younger officer's eyes widened. "And the lead officer?" He straightened immediately, his tone sharp with respect. "Sir, I didn't realize." I nodded once, cutting him off. "Now you do." Then I turned to Karen, my voice like steel. "You try to use my uniform, my service, and even the title of veteran to get your way. You lied to federal officers, impersonated family, and brought fake cops into a restricted area. Do you have any idea what kind of charges that carries?" Karen's hands shook so violently that her bag slid from her lap onto the floor. I didn't know," she stammered, her fake tears drying up instantly. Her face was pale, her confidence shattered. I just wanted." The lead officer cut her off this time, his voice cold. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for impersonation, attempted unlawful boarding, and conspiracy with individuals impersonating officers." He signaled, and 2 airport police stepped forward with cuffs. Karen's scream echoed in the small room, shrill and desperate. "No, you can't do this to me. He set me up. He's lying, I swear." But it was too late. The cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. And as they hauled her to her feet, I finally spoke the line I knew the cameras outside would love once the story spread. "You wanted respect, Karen. Well, respect is earned, not stolen." Karen's screams carried down the hallway as the officers dragged her back toward the terminal. The doors swung open and the crowd that had been waiting outside gasped, phones instantly rising again. She twisted in the cuffs, her face red with fury, and shrieked, "This is illegal." He set me up, I'm the victim, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of people who had seen everything. Passengers who had been silent before now shouted back, "We saw you lie." Someone yelled. Another voice cut through, "You brought fake cops." The gate agent, still shaken but braver now, stepped forward and pointed at her. She tried to force me to open the gate. She threatened me, and she lied about that man. The crowd cheered at the truth finally being spoken. Karen struggled harder, her hair wild, her face twisted. "You're all against me. You don't know who I am. I'll sue every one of you." But her words only fueled the chaos. Phones captured every angle. Karen in cuffs, screaming about conspiracies, the police holding her steady. What had started as her attempt to sneak onto a plane had turned into a public downfall broadcast live across social media, and then came the final blow. The lead officer stepped forward, holding up the counterfeit badges they'd seized earlier. He raised his voice so the crowd could hear. "These men and this woman conspired to impersonate law enforcement inside an airport. That is a federal crime. They are under arrest." Gasps, cheers, even clapping erupted. Travelers were standing on chairs, filming, some chanting, "Lock her up." Karen's face crumbled. For the first time, she looked small, powerless, exposed. The smirk was gone, the fake tears gone. What remained was raw panic. She turned her head toward me, eyes wide with a desperate plea. "Please, say something, help me." I met her stare without a flicker of sympathy. "You chose the wrong stranger to use," I said calmly, loud enough for the phones to capture. "And you tried to steal the honor I actually earned." The weight of those words landed heavy. The crowd cheered again, louder this time, as the officers pulled her toward the exit. Karen thrashed one last time, shouting curses, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of clapping, the sound of justice finally catching up to her. And in that moment I knew this wasn't just her downfall. It was a warning to anyone who thought entitlement and lies could overpower truth. But I wasn't celebrating yet, because I knew something Karen didn't. The fake cops she brought weren't just desperate friends. They were connected to something bigger, and that meant this story wasn't over. They marched Karen out, her screams fading into the distance, but the two fake cops were still inside the holding area. Unlike Karen, they weren't thrashing or yelling. They were silent, almost too calm. One leaned back in his chair, staring at the floor. The other watched me with a flat, cold expression, like he wasn't scared at all. That set off alarms in my head. The lead officer started processing their fake badges, shaking his head. "Cheap knockoffs," he muttered, but I stepped closer, scanning the patches on their shirts, the gear on their belts. Something didn't add up. Those weren't random props bought from a novelty shop. The stitching was precise, almost professional, and the way they carried themselves, they weren't amateurs. I crouched slightly, locking eyes with the one who had been staring at me. "Where'd you get the uniforms?" I asked. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just smirked. "Wouldn't you like to know?" That was confirmation enough. This wasn't Karen hiring a couple of desperate friends to play dress up. She'd stumbled into something bigger, or maybe she hadn't stumbled at all. Maybe she was connected. My gut told me these guys weren't playing just for her. The younger officer started cataloging their belongings. He pulled out radios, real ones, not toys, tactical earpieces, even a notebook with codes and numbers scribbled inside. His hands shook as he laid them on the table. "Sir, this isn't normal." I nodded grimly. "No, it isn't." Karen's meltdown had been dramatic, humiliating, viral fuel for the internet, but this was different. These men were organized, they were equipped. And if they were bold enough to try sneaking onto a plane with fake authority, then Karen might have just been a cover, an entitled decoy drawing attention while the real plan played out elsewhere. The lead officer turned to me, lowering his voice. "What do you think they're after?" I stared at the men who now sat smirking like they knew something we didn't. A chill ran through me. "I think," I said slowly, "Karen wasn't the main problem. She was the distraction." And as those words left my mouth, alarms blared through the airport loudspeakers. A piercing siren cut the air, followed by an announcement no traveler ever wants to hear. "Attention, security alert. All passengers remain where you are." The fake cops both grinned at the sound. The sirens wailed through the terminal, red lights flashing across the glass walls as the announcement repeated. People outside froze mid-step, clutching their luggage, eyes wide with fear. Fake cops didn't even try to hide their satisfaction. One leaned forward, his cuffs clinking, and whispered, "Right on schedule." Every officer in the room snapped to attention, radios crackling with panicked chatter. "Possible breach at Gate 12, one voice barked through, multiple subjects moving past security. The younger officer's hands shook as he looked at me. "Sir, what do we do?" I didn't hesitate. "Secure these two, now, they're part of it." The lead officer nodded and called for backup, but I was already moving. If this was coordinated, Karen's outburst had been nothing but a smokescreen. A circus to drag resources here while her partners made their move somewhere else. I sprinted down the corridor, my badge out, passengers flattening themselves against the walls as I passed. The sirens grew louder near Gate 12, and when I rounded the corner, I saw them. 3 more men in mismatched uniforms, trying to push past a barricade while screaming at real TSA staff. Their voices were aggressive, their stance military-like, but they froze when they saw me barreling toward them, hand raised. "Federal Air Marshal," I shouted, "stand down now." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then one of them reached into his jacket. My training kicked in before thought did. I grabbed his arm, twisted it down, and slammed him into the wall. The others panicked, bolting back toward the terminal, but real officers were flooding in behind me now. Within seconds, they were tackled and pinned to the floor. The crowd that had been trapped behind the barricade erupted into cheers. Phones rose again, recording the chaos, catching every shout, every takedown. And then, like fate itself had scripted it, Karen was dragged past the scene in cuffs, still screaming, still trying to twist her lies. But now, with her team exposed, nobody listened. The passengers booed her as she passed, some even shouting, "Traitor!" I stood there, catching my breath, watching as the last of her partners were hauled away. The lead officer approached, his voice firm but respectful. "You saved a lot of people today. If they'd gotten any further—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. We both knew how bad it could have been. I glanced around at the sea of phones still recording, the faces of families clutching their kids, the veterans in the crowd nodding at me with silent respect. My voice carried loud enough for them all to hear. This country isn't perfect, but as long as I'm breathing, nobody, Karen or anyone else, gets to steal our safety or our freedom. The crowd roared in applause. Karen's screams were swallowed by it, lost under the sound of justice and relief, and as the sirens faded and the terminal lights returned to normal, I felt the weight lift, not because I'd stopped Karen, but because I'd reminded everyone watching. Freedom and honor are worth protecting, no matter the cost.